So, you have volunteered or maybe been forcefully recruited to be a speaker at the Children's Church large group time. And so, what that's usually going to look like is on a Sunday from 11:30 to about 11:45, you'll have 15 to 20 minutes or so to speak to the kids. This will be all of them, ranging from preschool all the way up to sixth grade. That can be a challenge to hold their attention, and it can be a bit tricky. What I recommend is that you use lots of visuals, tell lots of stories, and do lots of things that the kids can engage in. Um, Here is what you don't want to do during this time. Do not simply reteach the Bible story. The reason for that is because the students have already heard the Bible story. They have read it through in their block one time with their small class. They've already seen it. They've already read it through. They've also already seen a 5 or so minute video that teaches the story for the day. So the children have already had two chances to learn the story. So as you teach, it's actually not in our best interest for you to spend your time simply repeating the story. Instead, I'd recommend that you recap the story with questions for the students to actually be the ones that are retelling the story back to you. So if it's the story of David and Goliath, you can say, "Today we've been learning about a young boy who was a shepherd and his name was," and allow the students to answer. We have a whiteboard that we keep score on, and anytime a student answers, if they're in pre-K, first through third, or fourth through sixth, depending on what grade they're in, have them raise hands. Whatever student answers, give 100 points to their team. The kids love that. They really engage. So use the first portion of your teaching time to have them actually teach the story back to you by asking questions. Then what I often like to do is find a creative way to begin teaching them not what the story says, but what God wants them to learn from the story. And so in the story of David and Goliath, one possible thing God wants them to learn is that God is big enough to overcome any challenge or any problem in their lives if they trust him. That God is big enough to bring down a giant even with a young kid like them. So that's what God wants them to learn. That's not what the story says, it's what God is teaching us through the story. So use your time to creatively express that. Here are some options for you. You can bring in an object that you could use to pass around with the kids and tell a story about that object. It could be a slingshot for the story of David and Goliath, or it could be something, an object that represents a problem or a struggle that you've had in your life that seemed too big for you to face. So you could bring in a piggy bank and tell a story about a time where you really didn't have enough money to make it through a certain season in your life, and yet God provided all the same. So there's lots of different ways. Another creative thing you can do is retell a very exciting and vivid story from your life. Recently, I taught the students about the time that God's presence and glory left the temple, and it was a way to tell the people that God was leaving. He was moving away. They had chosen not to follow him and be close, so he was allowing them to experience life without his blessing and presence and comfort. So I told the students a story about a time when I kept hiding from my mom in a store until one time she actually left the store without me intentionally, and I panicked and felt like I was all alone and was very scared. And it wasn't until I left the store looking that I saw her waiting at the exit of the store to give me a taste of my own medicine. And so I talked about a time when I felt like someone important had left me all alone. So you can share stories like that. But the goal in this time is to teach them not just what the story says, but what God wants them to learn for their life. So this is a chance for you to share a time where God really taught this lesson to you and give them examples now of what it looks like for them. What does it look like for a fourth grader in school on a Tuesday to really see God being bigger than their problems? So that's really what your goal should be with your 15 to 20 minutes. I'd encourage you to use pictures and PowerPoint slides. everything visual you can, funny videos, funny stories, object lessons, anything you can to help the students really get this lesson. But remember, the trap you don't want to fall into is just reteaching the Bible story because they've heard it twice. So this is your chance to share what God wants them to learn now, not just what it says. Have fun.